Curtain going up. Places, please. Overture, stand by.
Ladies and gentlemen, she comes to you from the cornfields of Indiana. She loves the Constitution more than she likes most people. Allow me to introduce Shouse in the House.
Okay, Wayne, I'm so glad that you're joining me today. I want to first give you the opportunity and talk about your life prior to. So tell me a little bit about what you did for work, like what part of England you're in, things like that. I'd love to know more about you as a person.
Sure. So I'm 50 years of age. I've worked all my life. I've always been a fairly healthy person, exercised regularly, gone to the gym, gone for a run. Always been very active, never stopped, always tired, always trying to keep busy doing things. Yeah, and then things changed, don't they?
What type of work do you do, or did you do, I guess I should say, if you don't mind me asking?
I still work for them. Obviously, I haven't actually been there in 7 months. Hopefully, they'll take me back at some point, but we have other discussions to come next week, so we have to see what happens. So basically, they are a retail company, food retail. I've been with them for about 8 years now. Before that, I used to work for a food manufacturer called Weetabix. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but I was with them for 21 years. So, yeah.
And what part of England are you in, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure. I live in Northamptonshire, which is about an hour north of London.
I used to live in Lincolnshire, so I'm familiar with the area.
Sure. So what made you move? If you don't mind me asking.
I went to school over there for a while. I had the joy and pleasure of living in Grantham when I was there, which is not is not a great place.
Oh dear.
But Lincolnshire in general, it's really interesting being able to live in England or Europe in general, and then see it's just so rich versus here in the United States is so, I always call it glossy. Like it's very new. And so I don't know, it's just different living over there, but I don't want to get sidetracked. I want to, let's go ahead. And the purpose of you and I having a conversation today is for my audience that doesn't know, Wayne received the jab and has had, and I have to be really careful. I'm just going to be transparent with you guys. If I say certain words, YouTube won't allow my episode to stay up. And I already have one strike against me, so I don't want any more. So, so I'm going to change some words around.
You can say the initials of the specific name, though, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, AZJab.
Oh.
Yeah.
So he received, and so tell me a little bit. First of all, which one did you get?
I had my AZJab.
Okay. And so when you had that, how long ago did you have the jab?
It's nearly 7 months ago now. Time seems to be really flying.
So when you received it, were you open to it beforehand? Did you feel pressured into getting it? I mean, you said you're 50, you're a healthy male. What made you decide to go ahead and do it?
There was a lot of hysteria of mainstream media and government were putting a lot of pressure on people because it's dangerous, it's deadly. This thing that's going around, you need to have these jabs to protect yourself, protect your family, your friends, and you don't hear anything negative about it, and so you think, well, I better have it. And so when I had my message on my phone to say that I could make an appointment to get mine done, and I did.
So afterwards, how did you know there was something wrong? What were some of the symptoms that you experienced, and what is your actual diagnosis now and prognosis moving forward?
Yeah, sure. So within an hour or two, you warned that you might get a slight headache or a little bit of arm ache. And so within an hour or two, I actually felt the arm ache and a slight headache. And I thought, okay, here we go. shouldn't be anything much. They don't warn you of anything else. So, but within those couple of hours, it got much worse, and the headache got so extreme that I just couldn't think. I couldn't process any thoughts, and I just had to go to bed. And I spent the next few days just basically lying in bed. I had great difficulty in getting a doctor to see me because here they don't do that. They don't all through this. They haven't wanted to see people,
Right.
And so I phoned regularly to be seen, and all they wanted to do was say, "It's fine, don't worry. It's just normal side effects." But I really don't feel well today. My headache is getting worse. My dizziness is getting worse. I'm starting to feel confused. And this was going on over a course of a week, and then it went into a second week. Repeatedly, all I was getting back was, "It's just, don't worry, it's just normal side effects." And I got to the point when I was either promised to be seen, promised to be invited in to be checked over, and then let down repeatedly. And I finally got admitted in by a GP because I sounded so bad over the phone. I was delirious, and I was not making much sense in my words. And within seeing me within minutes, he called an ambulance because I was struggling to walk down the corridor. I shouldn't have driven there, but I did, because by that point I'd lost my consciousness, my thoughts, my train of awareness of how bad I was.
So, Wayne, let me interrupt you really fast. If here in the United States, if you had gotten to that point, you would have just driven to the hospital and gone to the emergency room. So when you're talking about GP, you're talking about like a physician, like a doctor's
That's
office,
right.
just a traditional, and they wouldn't see you.
No, I mean, if I'd have realised how serious my condition was, I would have just gone straight to the emergency room, or the A&E is what we call it here. But I'd lost that awareness. And so when that's gone, you just accept that, I'm being told, don't worry, it's fine. And you just accept that. But when I was finally asked to come in, or told to come in, because I sounded so bad, and they said, well, we're going to call you an ambulance straight away. And they checked me over. My blood pressure was 203 over 120, which is extremely high.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, well, we were going to tell you to make your condition sound worse than it is, just so you got sore.
We don't have to.
I know, just so you got sore quicker and much more in depth. But we don't need to do that now because your blood pressure is far too high. And that turned out to be a new side effect then of having these jabs. So when they took me to the hospital, they obviously checked me over, and I was in there for 11 days. Had CAT scan, had MRIs, I had deep ophthalmic scans to actually just check there was nothing untoward going on through my retinas and everything else. And then I had a lumbar puncture. It was evident after they did the MRI scan that I had brain tissue damage, and they told me this. And I had two consultants both tell me in a prognosis that going forward they saw as being likely that I develop MS and or dementia. They still then carried on to do the ophthalmic scans and the lumbar puncture, even though they didn't need to. And if you've never had a lumbar puncture, I wouldn't recommend it. There's so many risks involved, possible risks.
When you're saying lumbar puncture, is that a spinal tap? Is that what?
Yeah, there's different terms for
Okay.
it. Yeah, that's what we call it here. It's obviously very similar. It's very equal to a woman having a
epidural.
Epidural, yeah. The pain is incredible. Going right into your spine with a needle, it's so dangerous. The risks of being paralyzed are so high, but they don't tell you this. They say there's a slight risk, but bear in mind I've been in the hospital for 11 days. I'm I'm on morphine to get through the pain anyway. So you just accept things. And I found out a friend of mine, she had a similar problem, and she's basically been laying in a bed for the last 4 or 5 months because it didn't go right. But they don't warn you of this. So I did eventually get discharged, and I suffered some neck issues connected to my lumbar puncture, because obviously when they drain the fluid from your spine, it's almost as like your neck, your head, it feels loose on your neck. And this is the problem I had for a few months, and it caused quite a lot of pain. Aside from everything else that I'm dealing with, I mean, I've still been left with dizziness, mental fuzziness, and it gave me an altered gait. So it's clear that when I'm walking, there's an issue. I don't have full coordination. Fortunately, I never developed seizures or shakes as a lot of jab victims do seem to do. But over the months, the prognosis has still been there at the back of my mind, and obviously I just deal with it day to day. Haven't really had much input from doctors or consultants for many months, because over here it's just very difficult to actually get anybody to see you, because they're so backlogged with other things going on in hospitals. So 4 months later, I saw a neurologist, and because my condition had been getting worse, shall I say, the headaches have been more extreme, the dizziness. I had some more MRIs done very quickly, within a week. There'd been some major changes to the activity in my brain. So originally the MRIs showed white shadowing on my temporal lobes, which is quite indicative, and it's quite similar to a lot of other people who have had these jabs. I've found out, I've just been asking questions, people on social medias. But there's been a major change over the last few months. They're not too sure what it means. They still don't know the prognosis for sure. Also, they're giving me this MS and or dementia. But now some of them say, well, maybe that's not the case, but they still don't know what it means. The white shadowing is now over the whole of my brain tissue, which is now a possible reason why I'm now getting such heavy migraines, because the headaches I've had for months have got worse. So a side effect of the jab is high blood pressure. So I've been dealing with hypertension ever since. And it's something I've never ever had before. But so the blood pressure medication that I've been on from being discharged from hospital has been steadily increased over the months, just to try and combat it from day to day. I do daily observations for your blood pressure checks. So dealing with that, bearing in mind, that's one thing. And then the pain relief has been increased steadily because the pain's been getting worse, which then turned into migraines. All seemed to be going fine up until a couple of months ago. And, well, probably about a month and a half ago now, I got such extreme headaches and I couldn't keep up with the pain relief. And I ended up being rushed into hospital. This happened on 2 different weekends. And it turned out I had brain inflammation.
That was the 2 times that we were scheduled to speak to one another, right?
This is it, yeah. It just seemed really unfortunate. Yeah, it was just quite... I thought I was progressing. I'd had some of a certain product that is available in America, and this country doesn't want to stock it. The GPs can stock it. They used to stock it many, many years ago. Begins with an I. And I managed to source them from a friend, and it made amazing differences to how I am. The brain fog or fuzziness amazingly cleared within a few hours. I'm still not 100%. I'm still got my neurological issues, and I probably will for the rest of my days. It's just unknown. Nobody really knows what's happening. But Fortunately, when I was released on the second time, I got some better pain relief. I've got more migraine medication, and that seems to be controlling things a lot better. I do have to take a lot of medication, which is the unfortunate thing, but the doctor seemed in agreement that that's okay, that's fine. And I spoke to my GP a couple of days ago, and he still seems fine with that. And so, yeah, it's one of those things that you have to just keep pushing on and progressing through, and hope that the next day is going to be as good. Because I've had a fairly good few days now, and I've actually been able to get back outside, enjoy some sunshine, actually go for a walk today, which I did just a short while ago. And I will pay for this tomorrow. I will be fatigued. It's just something that I do seem to still get. I even joined the gym again recently. My GP told me I needed to be getting more exercise. And bearing in mind that you're suffering dizziness, your normal everyday neurological problems that I've had for 7 months, and he tells me that I need to be doing some more exercise. So, okay, I joined my old gym, first time in 7 months.
Let me get right on that.
And I did some cardiovascular work on a stationary bike, and I went onto a treadmill, which I have to hold on because of the dizziness, and I just can't walk fast normally. And it felt great. It's strange to feel dizzy, but you progress and you push yourself through it. But the 2 times that I've been, each day, I felt so exhausted the day after. I just can't do anything. And I've just basically laid on the sofa, not doing anything for a day or two, because I just feel so exhausted. I'm trying alternative things like supplements, basic things just to protect your immune system a bit more, because once you have a jab, what they don't tell you is that your body's depleted of its own natural immunity now. And so you need to input it with vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, and all sorts of other things, because this is why you're at risk of catching, shall we say, a virus again. You're more at risk. And this is why people are now being rushed into hospitals, because their bodies have just got no protection. So I'm listening to my body that way, taking some smoothies, taking some more healthy fruit drink, just trying to boost my immune system a little bit better than it was. But you get warned about any of this. My doctors, my GPs, nobody warns you that there's a risk of your catching something that's so bad from a jab. The yellow card system in here is very similar to your VAERS system. It has some startling figures of people being injured and sadly who died from their jabs. But they don't warn you this beforehand. You just roll up to your clinic, your drive-by marquee that they had at the doctor's surgery in my car. They jab you, and then they give you an information leaflet. And basically, it's a very basic form that states, there might be some minor side effects. And that's all they tell you. They don't warn you of anything else. They've changed the forms since to make it more in-depth and actually warn you that you need to go to your emergency room, your hospital, you seek emergency help within a few days if you're not feeling well. This is 7 months later that they're actually making this information available.
Do you think, so I have a couple questions that I want to go off of what some of the stuff that you just said. Do you think that if you had gone to the emergency room faster, that your brain tissue damage and the other side effects and ailments that you have from this, do you think that would have been mitigated or minimized? Would there have been anything anyone could have done to prevent it?
Yeah, yes. So when I said I'd repeatedly phoned into my doctors about being seen, and they'd promised to invite me in, I made extensive notes all through this, because my brain doesn't seem to retain the information as well. And so I've got quite a document of dates and times and facts and figures. And quite clearly, when I got to the emergency room, the consultant said to me quite plainly and said, if only you'd gotten here sooner, the damage wouldn't have been extensive as it was. And I said to him, I said, but I've been fighting to get seen by my GP for 2 weeks, but they told me it was nothing to worry about. And by that point, obviously, I'd lost awareness of how serious I was, or else I would have then seen or sought some better attention. But
Right.
yeah,
Here in the United States, like you had mentioned the VAERS system, it's very almost like hush hush when somebody has adverse effects. It's the communication around the VAERS system is like, well, that's like Wikipedia. Anybody can add that information on. They're trying to discredit that system now and
right.
suggest that, this isn't as bad as people are making it out to be. So has anyone definitively told you this is because of, as a result of you getting the jab? Has anyone like outright said that to you from a physician perspective?
Yeah, because it was documented to my GP, they quite clearly said, and before he'd called the ambulance, he said, don't worry, I'm going to report this to the yellow card system, your equivalent of theirs. And that was the first time I've ever heard of a yellow card system. I thought, what's that? It's an accident reporting site for anybody who's had medication issues. Okay. And when I got to the hospital, the consultant said, don't worry, we're going to report it to the yellow card site. And I thought, wow, 2 people within the space of an hour or 2 have said this to me. But before that, I've never actually been aware of it. The narrative since has changed. I've had a lot of negativity through my GPs trying to say, well, maybe it's something else. And I had conversations with them. I said, well, hang on a minute. You tell me that it's directly linked to my jab. The consultant in the hospital told me it's directly linked to the jab because the jab caused a new side effect, which is high blood pressure. That directly then caused the tissue damage, so it is directly linked. And it is on my discharge papers as being directly linked to the jab. So that's all done in black and white. But ever since, my GP seems to change the narrative because there's pressure on them from government to actually change the dangers involved. They need to make it so that people are more likely to get jabs rather than all this information being released, and then it would stop that whole process straight away. So what I then did, because I had this doubt in my mind that I was actually not actually been logged with the yellow card system, so I actually did it myself a few months after. And I also then contacted AZJab, and they put me in touch with their neurological team. And supposedly they're going to help me in some way. I haven't had anything from them to this day, but supposedly that help is meant to be there for me. At least I know now it is logged, because this is what's happening. There's so many people not getting recorded on the system. So although the recorded system at the moment says there's 1,600 deaths in the UK, I think 1,300,000 cases of people having adverse reactions.
Mm-hmm.
A report came out a few days ago that I saw. It's probably been around for a while, but somebody did a lot of searching through various platforms, and he actually found all the data himself, compiled it all down to figure out what it meant. And it actually worked out there was about 30,000 deaths in the UK instead of what's actually been reported on the yellow card system. I know for a fact there's been 5,000 people who have died from their jabs in Scotland alone, which then paints a different picture. For the size of Scotland and the size of the UK, you then realise that 1,600 must seriously be wrong.
It makes me wonder because, I mean, here in I keep referring back to the United States just to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. But Going back to our reporting last year, I think the number ended up being like 2,900 is the number of people who died from, I'll edit that part out, who died from the virus with no comorbidities. And so when you put that into perspective, we're now talking about healthy people who were not sick that have now died. Like at what point do we weigh that cost benefit analysis? I guess is kind of like where I'm coming from, because that number is a lot different than what's being reported, and so it's kind of scary.
It is scary. It's the pressure that's there to keep driving this on. It makes you wonder what's going on, because the incentives are there. I mean, we've never had this in the UK as I've seen in America. It's like a free burger, get entered into $1 million draw, get out of jail free card purely if you'll get the jab. I mean, what? Why? Why should you need to be incentivized to get something that's supposedly meant to be good for your health?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Our country right now has reached 75% of the population that can be inoculated. 75% have had at least one shot. But the pressure doesn't match the number that's left, right? Like the amount of pressure that's there. Now we're talking about forcing it through your employers, and now there's a whole nother level of now we're starting to see the boot come down, right? Like I use that term pejoratively, obviously, but
it's totally warranted. Yeah.
I'm curious if you think, because there was a conversation that I had last night in my little space that I held, and we were talking about medicine in general in the United States versus in Europe. Do you think that the socialized medicine system that is in Great Britain has possibly contributed to the amount of time that it took for you to get into the hospital or to get the treatment that you need? You're talking about like your gait is messed up and you're still having neurological issues. Like, do you think that if you picked up the phone right now and said, hey, I think I need therapy, do you think you would be able to get it? Like, I just want to kind of understand how that looks as far as the way this is being treated.
Well, things have changed drastically over the months. I mean, obviously, I noticed from when I was in hospital 7 months ago and the care that I got, which was amazing. And I was hearing reports of all sorts of people being rushed in with similar issues. There was a guy who'd been disabled, but he'd actually regained pretty much fully mobility again with rehabilitation. And this was told to me plainly by the nurses and the people that were in there. The care that I got then has changed dramatically to what I got about 6 weeks ago. Even over the case of one weekend, I had some really good care. I mean, brilliant. But I was looked at very negatively because I'd only had one jab, and I can only have one jab. My GP has said to me, "You can't have any more because it's just too dangerous for you. The risk too great." But the negativity that was given to me by the sisters or people who were on the admittance was like, "Oh, you've only had one jab. Well, it's almost like I'm dangerous now.
You're a leper, yeah.
I'm risky to them." Yeah, definitely. There's been that strange change because I don't understand that if a jab is that, I keep nearly saying the word, if the jab is that safe, why should it matter if somebody hasn't been jabbed fully? Because they keep saying fully now. That means if you've had 1, 2, or as in Israel, 3, and they're even looking at the 4th now. So you'll never be fully jabbed because every 6 months you need another one.
Right.
And this whole pressure to keep getting jabbed, it's been locked into your workplaces now. I mean, you touched on that very briefly, and I've seen it's just starting here now. It was all meant to be in quite like a lockstep, all countries doing it at the same time. But something badly went wrong because we were seeing a lot of damage, injuries here. And Australia noticed this, and so they were very reluctant to actually take it up. And so they fell right behind, which is why they're now in serious lockdowns. They've been like for 8 weeks now. Even though they had no deaths, all they had was cases, and they get their cases from the false positives with the PCR test. So this then meant that they could lock them down because they had cases. Cases don't mean anything. If it picks up flu, picks up influenza, it picks up even if you've had the virus and you've recovered from it, it still picks it up. It's that flawed. Even the inventor of it, he said you shouldn't be using it for anything else because it's so flawed.
Right.
So this is the reason they can keep you in stasis by having these lockdowns. Unfortunately, we managed to get out of lockdown, we get some sort of more normality back, but then they keep having these cases to keep driving the narrative about, oh, you need to keep having your jabs because it's still so deadly. So now they link it into your workplaces, and I've seen in some parts of America, it's just starting to kick in. France, Italy have had it so badly that they're locking nurses and doctors out of their workplaces because they refuse to be jabbed. They see the dangers, they see the risks, and also don't believe in the jab passport. This is something that should never have ever been created because it's taking your freedoms away. You know, they're going to launch it here in October, part of our winter safety plan. It's all to protect the people. They're going to jab children, they say, from the starting of this week. I think it was meant to be Monday, but there's due to be some sort of parliamentary discussions over it Monday, Tuesday, and then it could be Wednesday, possibly, that it starts. The JCVI, which is the equivalent of the CDC in America, says you do not need to jab children. It's not warranted. They're not at risk. There are actually more risk, more chances of harm from the jabs, so you don't need to do it. We recommend you do not do it. So then the chief medical officer stepped forward. Your equivalent is obviously Mr. Fauci. No, we're going to do it anyway. Why are you going to do it? You don't need to do it. You've been told by the science, you've been telling us all along to listen to the science. The science tells you what to do. Science is telling you don't do it, but you're going to do it anyway. So you're putting 12 to 15-year-olds at so much risk of, you've heard reports over there, I'm sure, as well, because I've seen various cases of Americans, young children being hurt by the jabs because it's causing myocarditis and various other serious problems.
I just read a report the other day where it was like 1 in every 2,500, I think is what it was, children between the ages of 12 and 15, 1 in every 2,500 gets myocarditis. I think is how you say that word. Yeah.
I mean, if that's true, that's still too many.
I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah, but it's also the other risks. It's like not everybody will die from the jab, but every other one will suffer something. I know personally a couple of people who went blind from the jabs in my small town. There are at least half a dozen who have had other similar issues to myself, brain tissue damage. There's so many people I'm on touch with on a social media that have had blood clots. There's different risks linked to different jabs. It seems to be, to me, from what we're talking, we seem to be finding this. The batch numbers also seem to indicate certain issues as well. Purely a good friend noticed this herself, and people she was talking to noticed similarities in that certain batch number. And to this day, I've only seen one other person with my batch number having a similar issue. I spoke to her last night, and sadly, her mother had died. She was very sheltered to a lot of what was going on because nobody wants to admit to you that it's linked to your jabs. They try to keep it so quiet, so secret. And just by talking to her, and she told me about this, and I said, "Well, what's the number?" Because here's mine, and hers is 10 digits out of what mine is, but it's still an AB, which is all part of that batch number, and that's the first one I've actually encountered so far. But there's so many batches, there's so many variations, because this seems to be what they've done, that they've changed the recipe or the ingredients all the way through to see different reactions and different things, which is why there's such a variation in people with different injuries. Yeah, okay, there's many that I've seen in America and I'm friends with through social medias, and there's certain different help groups. I don't know if you want me to mention the help groups.
Yeah, no, I think that's great for people who are experiencing the same thing. Please do.
Yeah, there's, one's very closely linked to the name that we can't mention, so I can't say that one. But No More Silence, which is an amazing one. Robert Kennedy is actually linked to that.
Okay.
He's very supportive of the work that's been done with that. But they've got a website, and they'll actually do what they can for you, supportive-wise, information, and they'll actually share your stories on their website just so you can feel you're getting some sort of support and help for others. And there's another one, No Fear is another one that's helped me very early on. I'm on quite a few different ones just purely because I now try to help others.
Yeah.
Purely through my experiences, because for months afterwards, after being discharged from hospital, I was alone. I felt like there was nothing. I discovered so much information on social media whilst I was in hospital because there was nothing to do. I was dosed up on morphine. I needed something to pass the time. And I discovered so many people had also had injuries. And it just, I couldn't believe it. But I opened my eyes to it, and I've now decided to do what I can to better inform others of potential risks so they can make a better decision. If you feel that your immune system is compromised, you've got underlying health issues, you feel there's some small benefit of help in a jab, go for it. I don't tell anybody not to have it. I tell people that there are serious risks involved. Just look at my cases and various others. Long-term data is the problem, though, because these things are still in trial for another 2 years.
Right.
This is the scary thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you feel like there's a concerted effort to kind of silence people like yourself in your experience? Because you said that when you first came out of this, or when you were first dealing with this, that you felt incredibly isolated. Do you think that's done intentionally so that you're not able to help people, or not able to, I guess, inform people so that they can make the right decision for themselves?
Certain social medias do censor heavily, hence why you can have to be very careful when saying certain words. Even texting, messaging on social medias, you have to alter the wording of certain things, or else you will get suspended, banned. I've had banned for a few days at a time, purely for innocently saying something, and then discovering that I've said something bad. So yeah, there is something there that they do want to stop the information being seen, but the words do get out. Unfortunately, the more popular you are, the more traffic you seem to be driving, you will get suspended and you will probably get banned. Yeah. I mean, there's been quite a number of celebrities, famous people who've spoken out repeatedly, and sadly they are no more. Their message is still getting through because they decide to release via various other platforms like BitChute and message sharing sites, who then can share with others So the help is still there, and obviously, if you are careful, you can still stay kind of below the radar a little. And so far,
Right.
I've been very lucky. I've only had a day ban or now and again, because my aim is it's just to help people. I've been through a heck of a lot. People have been through way worse than me, and the poor people that actually end up losing a relation purely for doing something that they were told was right to do by the government or the media. And the media are shocking because they won't even print any of this. And they don't get the
That's
chance to voice.
that's why I wanted to have you on. I feel like when I came across your story, I was like, wow, I wonder how, and it provided this has been a little bit earlier on in this process. It's just been a while for you and I to be able to sit down with one
It's
another.
fun.
But it makes me think about like, wow, there are a lot of people out there maybe that are experiencing this, but I'm not hearing about it. I'm certainly not hearing to the degree with which you have been through. So I think that it's important to have these conversations to help people make informed decisions. Not
Definitely.
necessarily to say do or don't do it, but that it's not just going to be a sore arm or a headache. There are other potential things that may be involved. So you've touched on government and media, so I want to talk about those two things for a second. How do you feel about the government now being involved with mandating this, right? Like we're starting to get to the point where it feels very authoritarian as far as this is concerned. And then the response from the media almost like inviting it. In the past, the media was supposed to hold the government accountable across the world, right? Like that was their responsibility, was to be kind of that additional check and balance. They call it the fourth estate. So talk to me a little bit about what your thought process is there.
So, I mean, around the world, the press have always been free to print whatever they deem is in the public's best interest.
Right.
So, if something that is going to harm them, that's going to put something in a bad light, whether it be the government, celebrities, whatever it will be, they're always there to print that. All through this whole year and a half, there's only been one narrative, regardless of how many people who've been injured, whatever their experiences, cases, whatever. As long as it goes with the government narrative, that's fine. I've spoken to various columnists in the newspapers, and a very interesting story. I've had some very good replies from some of them here in the UK, but they're just not allowed to print anything because there is this draconian emergency law in place that stops anything going against the government narrative. We had a recently new 6-month updates put in place again because the 6-month law had run out. So basically, they had to apply again for the emergency laws to be put back in place. And the government should basically rush that through because it gives them uncontrolled power over everything. So basically, even though the jabs aren't cleared for use, because it's under emergency law, they can basically say they have the mandates to then say, we deem it necessary to protect you, to protect everybody, but you should have it. That's now shifted to being linked to your jobs, to your welfare. You can't now go to supermarkets, to stadiums, to theatres, unless you have your jab passport up to date. To now link that to, as in France and other parts of Europe, to coffee shops, supermarkets, just regular day-to-day activities. Australia, you can't even go to your cemetery to visit your relative who's passed away, your friends. You can't even go there unless you've got your passport up to date. You get arrested. People can't even walk down the street without a mask on in certain zones in Australia. Now, you're in the open air. There's no risk. It's fresh air. You can't be in a safer place. But firstly, you've got to have your jab passport up to date. If you're not, you're then arrested. You then find, because you haven't got a mask on in certain zones, it's all about power. It's all about driving you to get that jab and have it regularly up to date. They're now linking it into your jobs. So various professions are just starting here in the NHS, which is the medical services hospitals. So they now have to have those jabs mandated. If you don't, you've got to have it done by a certain date. I think Australia, the trades people, construction industry, they've got to have them done by the end of next week, or else they are then out of a job. It's filtering through everything, every possible job you could think of. It's not from the companies themselves. They're then told to by the government. It's a mandate. It's got to be done. Now, there's no possible reason why you need this, because if your jab protects you sufficiently, or it should do, that's the whole reason behind it, then it doesn't matter who else has been jabbed or not. But the fact that they're now saying to children that you've got to have a jab to protect your parents who've been jabbed. Well, hang on a minute. They've already been jabbed. So why do the kids need to be jabbed to protect them further? They're not at risk. It just doesn't make sense. And now they're talking about babies. I think South Africa's got this plan to jab, from 6 months to 17-year-olds. They were just going to do the whole lot all in one, which is so crazy because people are put more at risk. Younger people haven't got the ability to fight off jabs and ingredients because it's just too strong on the body. It's too much risk. If you're an older person, it's bad enough, isn't it? Because, you're getting people like myself who've had these injuries because we just can't handle what's in them. So what happens to the children? I've asked my MP to actually, what's in place for when this starts? Have you got some sort of medical facility? Because I don't know if you saw it in our UK papers a couple of days ago. They've actually stated that they're going to have police on standby, because basically what they want parents not to have a say in this. They want to give the 12-year-old child the ability to actually say yes or no to have a jab. Yeah? It's now going one step further. So they now want to have police at the gates to stop parents getting involved. But the health official, the person who's going to be given the responsibility of jabbing, they are the ones who are now going to decide if that 12-year-old child has a jab. That's taken away from the child and the parent. So you're being forced to have a jab regardless. That's dangerous. It's enforced. It's brutal. It's brutal, isn't it? It's just...
It's scary. The idea that... And, I saw a couple, bigger accounts and things like that on Twitter were talking about how many, that's probably going to get, anyway, anti-people there are. But the problem is it's not anti, it's possibly hesitant or, but I have consulted with my physician, and my physician has advised me that at this time, given the information that we do know so far, that it is dangerous for me to have this.
That's great. Brilliant. Yeah, that's actually nice to hear, isn't it? It's nice to hear. You don't hear that from a lot of physicians and doctors.
But that was a conversation between my physician and I. If I work for an employer of 100 people or more, even though I just recovered from 3 weeks ago, I have to submit either to weekly testing or get the jab, or I lose my employment.
That's right.
And now they're talking about you won't qualify for unemployment benefits if you're terminated for this reason. So we're starting to get into some really scary precedent where the relationship between me and my physician is being removed, and the government is assuming the role of doctors. I don't know. It's just really scary as far as I'm concerned. Where do you see this going moving forward? there's no legal recourse for you right now. You can't go to AZ and be like, "Hey, look, you screwed me over." You can't do anything in that regard. You could, I guess, potentially your GP, you could hold them accountable for not having treated you.
I've tried to follow that legally, but because of the way they record your meetings or your consultations, albeit over the phone, the record keeping is such that it defends the way they've spoken to you. So although I've got all these conversations noted down in my history on my phone, it differs greatly to what they've actually put down in the legal record. Supposedly I've rang in saying I'm absolutely fine, I'm wonderful. And then you think, well, if you're that wonderful, why am I ringing my doctor?
Right.
It just doesn't make sense.
Wow.
So the narrative's already been changed to protect them and to protect what they want to state. Taking it away from the doctors, that's just awful. So going forward, so it's all to drive the jab passport being brought in so they can have another element of control. So you touched on it with benefits. So if you can't work, you also then can't claim benefits like unemployment because you haven't been jabbed. That's dangerous. It's also going to be in time once they've forced it through, because they need to force it through first. They need to get as many people jabbed as possible. I think it's about 75%, or there's a certain limit. It's already been stated what it is. It's already kind of leaked through from other countries. Once that's in place, they can then force through the jab passport. Then they can link it into your bank accounts. They've got that ultimate control over your life and what you do.
Do you think that this is an attempt to eventually move into the Chinese version of the social credit system? Because that's what we're getting into like discriminatory behavior.
It's been mentioned that way. There is a guy on Twitter. I can mention that, I guess. Yeah. And he was linked to the government. He's actually a very knowledgeable person. He's actually pointed out the certain ways forward. And that is basically what he's already looking at and the way it is. You have to live a healthier lifestyle. You basically are deducted on the way you want to live in China, for instance.
Yeah.
You have to not go above your carbon limit, so if you want to travel regularly, you're restricted because, but you haven't lived a healthy enough lifestyle. You haven't bought the right products. That's where you've got to stop. Basically, you're being restricted. Now, I wonder if that then rolls out to other people, like people in the media, certain celebrities, big name people who travel for a living on their private jets.
Right.
Well,
politicians.
Surely there's a difference. I mean,
right.
there's a much bigger carbon footprint left by somebody else with a private jet than me just going down the road in my car.
Yeah.
Surely. It's definitely a two-tier system, isn't it? It's quite scary where it's going. There's a lot of people trying to make a difference. Seeing protests in America, and there's ones regularly here in the UK of people just trying to make a difference, just trying to say, look, this isn't acceptable. They're now trying to do these protests to stop the children being jabbed because, again, that's a scary precedent. There's enough people being put at risk health-wise, let alone kids. And I contacted my MP just to say, look, is there something in place to try and save a life? Because the chances of a child dropping down, with something serious, are so much higher than an adult. I'm afraid from going forward. You can just see what's going to happen. There's just going to be left, right, and centre kids dropping. It's horrible.
Well, I hope for England's sake that that's not something that moves forward. I think that would be, already we're to line in the sand moments here in the United States, I think, with some of the some of the decisions that have been made and rolled out here recently. But if you start talking about parents being removed from conversations with 12-year-olds being jabbed, I think you're going to start seeing some different reactions here in the United States. I don't see that going over very well here. So
It was in two online newspapers, The Guardian and The Telegraph. They actually had that on their front pages on the digital version, actually removing that choice from parents and the pupil. And that just sounded very scary, very draconian, very evil,
yeah,
which is alien to the life that we lead from day to day. To all of a sudden have your freedoms taken away from something that's been fought for your freedoms for many years.
right.
American, it's part of your constitution. You know, your my words aren't very good because I get very fuzzy, but it's
It's
something.
okay.
It's something you fought for much strongly than a lot of
Yeah.
other countries, and that's just been erased, isn't it? From what I've
Yeah.
seen, it's horrible.
Yeah, it's really hard. And I'm still very much in love with our Constitution.
Mm,
I'm a very freedom loving individual. And to see so many people not just be okay with it, but almost ushering in the idea of government control is just disgusting to me. And I have no
mm,
problem saying that to anybody. And I don't
yeah,
care if it gets
just
taken down for that reason. So
mm,
it's really, really gross to see people wanting the government to take control. That the shedding of responsibility for yourself and your family,
mm.
it's unexcusable as far as I'm concerned. So Wayne, I am going to let you go because we're approaching an hour. I
Okay.
really want to tell you thank you so much for sharing your story with me. Can you share with my audience how they can find you and
Yeah, yeah,
get in
sure.
touch with you if they want to talk to you?
Yeah, sure. On Twitter, I'm on all social medias as the same. It's at Wayne TLC. It's all lowercase. Um, yeah, I mean, if I can help you in any way, fine. My experiences, I hope, will make a difference to some people. Um, if it just saves you going through what I've been through, it's done its job. But yeah, it's been nice for me to be on. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Wayne. You take care and have a great day. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to be notified whenever we have another episode come up, please subscribe. We are available on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen. Please make it a great day in America. This is the country where few people leave, too many people want to enter, and dead people still vote. Take care.
Praise the Lord, and pass the ammunition, and we'll all stay free.
I know not what course others may take. But as for me, give me liberty or give me death!